Hello and welcome to episode 50 of the Barndoor restoration. Last episode, this was on the rotisserie, and I finished off the details on the bottom. This episode, I was back on the frame jig, and I did a bunch of little things, but mostly I worked on the brackets for where the cargo door hinges mount and the B pillar. So last episode, it was on the rotisserie, and I decided it was a good idea, while I had the chassis on its side, to weld the bulkhead. So across the top of the underseat storage and up the two gussets support the center. Because I could get the spot welder in from the top, and it was easier on its side to use a spot welder. Now the gussets, when I welded those in, I didn't weld the bottom. I left those so that I could fine-tune the position of the bulkhead. As these pillars here need to be perpendicular with the frame rail, and then the bulkhead lines up in a specific point. And it's easier to have this a little adjustment here until I get it all finalized. And then I can weld the bottom of the gussets in and everything will be solid. I did pre-drill the bottom of the gussets for plug welds because there's quite a bit of stress on that bottom section. If the bulkhead takes an impact, it mostly transfers down the bottom of those gussets. So I'll plug weld those and then I'll spot weld them after. And once I had the bulkhead welded, I put it back on the frame jig. I'm still playing around with the rotisserie and how to work it. The main thing I had to do was drop it down. And I could have put a jack underneath the chassis and then lowered it down. But I thought maybe I could do it just by loosening the bolts and letting it slide. Which kind of worked, but I was afraid it would suddenly drop on me, so I put a ratchet strap. And then I allowed it to go down to the ratchet strap, come tight, and then I tighten the bolt, loosen the strap, and let it down again. It turns out that the way I built it, if I just turn the bolts, they almost work like a pulley, and it kind of lowers itself down. So it worked quite well. So I lowered the front down onto the sawhorses because with the frame jig there, I couldn't get it in over. I had to lift it up and move it over. At the back, I was able to drop it right down and into its place. So it's currently all bolted down solid. I put all the bolts in the frame jig because I don't want it to twist while I'm building the body. So onto the A-pillar. I had a lot of details to do on the A-pillar. I was kind of hoping to get it finished, but it took an awful lot of time to build all the little pieces that were missing or destroyed. So the cargo door hinges. So I brought my cargo door up just so I could get measurements off it. These hinges slide into the slot. And then behind there is a bracket with a tapping plate that's in a cage. And the bolts go through two holes through the hinge into the tapping plate. So the problem with this one is the bottom section was completely missing, so I had to build all that from scratch. And the top, where these holes were, was destroyed. And those holes are kind of punched in with a lip on the backside. I have one here that I made as a test. And so the holes have a lip all around them. So to make that, I actually got a couple pieces of plate. I put 20 millimeter holes in one side, 18 in the other. And then I clamped my plate in. I'd put the bends in it, clamped the two plates together, and I took a socket and drove down through. Now the plate, I put 14 millimeter holes in that, and that allowed, when the socket went down through, to make a nice little flange. So that made the flange just like the original. So this is the piece that come off of this one. It was all destroyed and welded and holes in it, so it wasn't any good. So I made a new piece for here. Held it in. And I think I need some for the back post because it's the same setup. So I made an extra one. But I'll keep my my little die until I do that rear corner. Now the lower ones down here, I actually punched them right into the pillar. I was going to punch a piece out and then weld it in, but I thought, well, I'll try doing right in the my metal. It was a bit awkward. I should have done it before welding this together, but it worked out well. I also should have done it before cutting the rectangle in for the hinge to go in, as the hinge slides in through this hole. Because I had the hole there, it didn't like to, I had to tidy up that after. If I had made the hole after, it would have stayed nice and straight like these. So that's the first step. Now this is a plate that welds up inside there, and it spot welds to the outer skin, and spot welds, well, it's actually jammed between the inner and outer B pillar. Spot welds in. I originally thought it was good, but there's a cage that sets in here, and that was rusted, and there's a tapping plate. This is the one actually was bolted to the lower hinge, but the tap plate was missing. It had fallen out. So I figured, well, I got to take this out of there, and there's a little rust behind it. So I removed this out, and it also had a section of the center had stress cracked around it and was actually missing. So I had to weld a new center in it. So I removed that, and the original cage was pretty rusty too. And I need to make one for the bottom, so I made 2 of those. So the tapping plates are 3mm steel, but the threaded section is raised out the back. So they make that by kind of punching the hole through and then tapping it. So you end up with like 5mm of thread in a 3mm plate. So I had to figure out how to do that. And what I come up with is I drilled, I think it was a 3mm hole in the plate, and I took a 7mm drill bit, and I made a point on the end of it and cut it off, and then I set it in the press. I set it on the 3mm hole, put it in the press, and drove it through. I actually had another plate with a 10mm hole that I set it on, and then I pushed that piece of drill bit, 7mm drill bit, through. And that gave me the nice raised piece in the back. And then I just drilled it to 7mm and tapped it. So they worked quite well. And how they work is the tapping plate has 2 slots in the back, or the cage has 2 slots in the back, and that raised section is what holds that plate in there. Now, later buses, they didn't use a cage like this, they just had a strap that went in the middle. So what happens is this tapping plate sets the back of this bracket, and then the cage sets in, and that cage is spot welded to the bracket, and then a little bead of weld at the top, and that allows that plate to slide around in there. So that's the top bracket. Now I didn't have anything for the bottom. I figured it was the similar design. I did find some photos after a while, and basically the top one extends up inside, but it can't extend down because of the opening for the semaphore. The bottom one is longer, so it basically has both sides on it. It sets down in here, so it sets in like this. And there's a bulge that's in these, probably for strength. So I had to figure out how to make that. What I ended up doing, I took a piece of steel rod, I think it was about 10mm, maybe a little smaller, and I took a 2mm sliver off it, and I rounded the ends. And then I took another plate, and they say it's 3mm plate, I just made a rectangle. And then I made some blocks on here to align the 2 plates up. And then that I just put in the press, and that gave me a nice little ridge. Then I had to bend it. Now this is a test piece I started to bend with, and if you just put it in the brake and bend it, then you end up flattening the corners off. So what I ended up doing is I had some 3mm plate, and I'd set it in the brake. And my brake is adjustable, so I can adjust how much it clamps, and the top of it I can slide back and forth. So I was able to make up for that extra thickness and then bend it, and that allowed it to bend without crushing the bulge. It actually come out quite nice. I'm quite happy with that. And it looks very much like the original one. So all these little bits took a lot of time. There's so many little details, like the raised threads on there, and you know, this bulge, putting that in, to figure out how to do those things, and trial and error. And these little cages actually have a little indent in them also. Not sure why that's there, why it's necessary, but they had it, so I put it back in. Once all the little brackets are finished off, I moved on to the pillar. Now, when I welded the bottom section on, I made sure it matched my pattern. This pattern I made off my 64 bus, and just sets up on here. That way I could get the curve, make sure the curve was just right. And it did match until I welded in all these spot welds and the patch and such. And because it shrinks when you weld on it, it made it too much curve. So the curve was terrible. But I managed to get it back by just stretching this lip. Everywhere the spot welds, I filled in the spot welds, I stretched. And I was able to bring the curve back. Of course, I overstretched it, and then so I had to shrink it, and I overshrunk it, and I had to stretch it again. I guess the point is, a little bits at a time, and keep checking. It's much better than going too far and have to reverse. It actually worked out better than I thought. I thought I was going to have trouble trying to get the curve right because of this double lip here. So that's about all I accomplished for this episode. It doesn't look like much, but it was a lot of hours. There's a fiddly little bits, take forever. So next episode, well, I plan on having the outside of this B pillar finished and all the brackets welded in. And hopefully the inner B pillar will be mostly done, if not complete. I would like to have them both done, but there's going to be quite a bit of time spent in this also to get it finished off. We'll see how it goes. Drawings. I haven't uploaded anything to GrabCAD lately. I am going to start with the B pillar stuff. I'll get these brackets and stuff uploaded, and then I'll get these other parts as I finish them. I'm also going to upload some patterns, specifically this one. I was lucky to have another bus so I could get that off of. Now that pattern probably won't match well to other buses. For instance, I measured 4 points on my bus, which should have been the same, but they were all different. That's kind of an average of them. The way these are put together, they weren't very accurate. So I think that's kind of what they were going for. But if I didn't have that pattern, it would have been very difficult to try and make these, get these curves right, because the left side of this one was basically destroyed. And then they see the right rear panel is rusted, and it's got a little flex bent to it, so it's been hard to tell exactly what the curves are supposed to be. So I'll upload that in case anybody wants it. Keep watching for some video of, well, it's kind of scattered because basically everything, from taking off the rotisserie to welding the bulkhead to building these parts. And I have no idea how long these, I edited them, but I didn't pay attention to the length, so I don't know if it's long or short. But anyway, there'll be a bunch of video after this, and some detailed shots of these parts. So thanks for the comments, appreciate them, and thanks for watching.